Hello and welcome to our special programming on the US election results. I'm Gargi Rawat, and it's been quite a day. Donald Trump poised to become president of the United States again in a remarkable comeback to the White House. And election, which was called one of the closest ever, turned out to be not so close at all, with Trump winning the Electoral College votes decisively. There you can see on your screens 280 to Kamala Harris's 224. But he also won the majority of the popular vote, something he didn't win when he won the last time around. In fact, the only Republican president in over 20 years to get majority of the popular vote. In fact, according to initial reports, Trump made gains with nearly every demographic group compared with his 2020 loss. So let's take a look at what we're focusing on in this show. The US election results have a far-reaching impact on the rest of the world, which is why it's followed as closely as it is and why we've been following it so very closely. A Trump presidency means a major shift in US politics and policies on several issues, tremors of which will be felt far and wide. The good news is Prime Minister Narendra Modi shares a good relationship with Donald Trump. He was one of the first world leaders, in fact, to congratulate him, referring to him as my friend Donald Trump. So will we now see India and US relationship only growing stronger, especially given Trump's stand against China? There's also, of course, the trade issue. These are some of the factors that we're going to be going into. But let's go across now. I'm joined by my colleague Gauri Dwivedi, who joins us from Washington, D.C. And Gauri is going to be taking us through what these election results also mean. Also joining us, Alistair D'Souza from Washington, D.C. And Gauri, first to you, quite the day. It's been quite, we thought this might carry on for a few days, and I think everybody's already spoken about it, how decisive it's been. It's not even been close. Now that people are waking up to this result, what have the reactions been like?
A very good morning, Gargi, to you and all our viewers of NDTV from Washington, D.C. It's a bright, sunny morning here, and sun has effectively now risen for Donald Trump, hasn't it? Who would have thought that his political career, which went into complete oblivion, so many people here in D.C. told me that Trump was a pariah just 24 months back. And look at the comeback he has had. He is now, of course, going to be the next president of the United States. The town that is so blue and will remain so till the 19th of January, even there, many in the corridors of power here conceded that Trump had a victory simply because his campaign was sharper and his messaging was far clearer as against a Harris campaign which went back and forth because for many, Kamala Harris couldn't decide whether she was an extension of a Biden administration or whether she wasn't. And that flip-flop, of course, meant that Donald Trump heads back to White House in about 70 days from now, Gargi.
That's right. And Alistair, do tell us, what are supporters of Kamala Harris saying? I know we're going to be, looking at these results and deciphering them for a long time, analyzing them for a long time to come. But, the next day, what are people saying? What didn't work for Kamala Harris? What worked for Donald Trump? Did it just boil down to the basics of the economy, inflation, people not wanting illegal immigrants coming in?
Crushed, devastated, broken, shattered, pull out all those sad adjectives from the sad book, Gargi. You're hearing that here and across the country from Democratic supporters, especially here in Washington, D.C., which is largely Democratic. It was kind of seen last night as well at the rally that Kamala Harris was holding at Howard University, her alma mater. She was going to be there hoping to make her victory speech. Of course, that did not happen. In the late hours last night, we actually saw people leaving much before her campaign manager actually said that she would not be speaking last night. We're still waiting to hear from her as to when she's going to speak. Certain reports saying that she's going to speak at around 4 p.m. Eastern time. That's about 4.5 hours from now from Howard University. So that speech closely being watched Her supporters will be closely listening to what she has to say. Also, we're hearing that she's going to call Donald Trump and concede that defeat to Donald Trump as well. So those are some of the reactions coming in. There's also going to be a whole bunch of soul searching, as you said. What went wrong here? Did Biden stay on too long in the race? Should Biden have stayed on in the race? All kinds of questions. Also, should Kamala have distanced herself from Biden in this case? There was, I remember one interview where she was asked, what would you do differently as far as moving away from Biden's policies that we've seen Biden implement over 4 years? And she came around and said something along the lines of that there's not one thing that I would change. So should she have really made herself distinct from President Biden? Those are the questions that are also going to be asked. And finally, there's also going to be a sense of worry. What's going to happen to the country with Donald Trump's policies? Many of the Democrats see his policies as not very American. We've heard of deportation of millions of illegal immigrants that he plans to undertake. Then there's also the question about his revenge politics. Is he now going to come after certain members of the Democratic Party? All those questions, those worries really front and center today.
Right, everyone talking about that interview that Kamala Harris
in fact,
gave
Alistair,
to the View.
that interview really did her in, didn't it? That interview really did Kamala Harris in when she said that there's nothing that she would do differently from the Biden administration. And in fact, Gargi, the most interesting aspect, and something that we can get Natasha in on, is when Pennsylvania actually flipped. I was there at Howard University, and that's when faces really fell, when it became so clear that Pennsylvania, which was really the most crucial state, had gone the Trump way. And we can get Natasha on that what really is the mood like on ground, and what is it that voters said and felt, and the reason why it actually went to Trump.
Well, Alistair, I think if you can take that question, we will try and connect with Natasha later, but go ahead, Alistair.
Yeah, indeed, there was much effort, lots and lots of money, millions of dollars, almost $1 billion pumped into this campaign in order to make Kamala Harris very distinct from Biden, very distinct from Donald Trump, of course, playing up on, like I said, those American values, standing up for things that kind of Trump had thrown under the bus. But of course, that messaging did not really work. So campaign managers in Kamala Harris's campaign will obviously be searching for those answers to find out what exactly went wrong. And as far as that interview goes, those thoughts are coming back to me. Soon after that interview actually played out, many of her campaign managers, this is the interview where she said, I wouldn't change a thing as far as Biden's policies go. Many of the campaign managers came out and tried to backpedal and said that, no, that's not entirely what she meant. So you can see a lot of damage control mode at that point in time. Of course, a great disappointment as many of those swing states have swung not in her favor, but in fact in Donald Trump's favor. So lots of people hurting this morning, of course, the Democrats being at the top of the list, which has helped them, Kamala Harris and her supporters.
All right, Alistair, thank you so much for joining us on the program. We will return to you later, but let's now introduce our panel to talk more about what a Donald Trump presidency, the second time round, will mean for the world, what will it mean for India. We're joined by Vivek Mishra, Deputy Director, Strategic Studies Program, ORF. Adele Malka Nazarian, American media personality and political analyst, senior fellow, Gold Institute for International Strategy. Rick Mehta, former Republican nominee for U.S. Senate and biotech entrepreneur. Ajay Jain Bhutoria, Deputy National Finance Chair, Democratic Party and Asian American Community Leader. Raymond Vickery, a Senior Associate, Center for Strategic and International Studies. Dr. Swasti Rao, geopolitical expert. Shashank, former Foreign Secretary, and Neelam Dev, former diplomat, all joining us. Thank you so much, everyone. And with me, Gauri Dwivedi joining us from Washington. And Gauri, I'll take the first question. Ajay Bhutoria, first to you. Now that you may have had some time to take in this result, I'd like to get your view on what you think worked for Trump and what didn't work for the Democrats. All right, I'll take that question. We'll be joined by Mr. Jain in just a moment. But Vivek Mishra, I think if you could take that question, please.
I think three factors to my mind really stand out. One is the fact that economy and the inflation bit really rings loud with the people here, in the sense that if you look at the Biden administration's steps in taking down inflation, they've been significantly successful. But to the extent that it didn't ring with the grocery prices, Biden administration's steps were largely associated with bigger reforms, which would resonate, let's say, 10 years, 20 years down the line. For example, the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, the Chips and the Sciences Act, and so forth. And therefore, the everyday prices became an issue. That was one. The second was illegal immigration, which even the hinterland states in the US and my conversations here have reflected that there is a growing concern about how this might shape in the future. So illegal immigrants, the asylum system, the inability of the last administration to fix it, the numbers, which actually were very high under the last administration in terms of how many people really crossed over from the border. Interesting statistics on how many Chinese illegal immigrants crossed over the last year, which was really something to watch out. And I think third, to my mind, is some sort of consternation among the voter base that Kamala Harris did not really burn herself out through the primaries and the caucuses, and it was a line broken, and that's where Trump administration stood out for having been in this game for far longer than she was.
All right, interesting. So you think that could have been one of the factors, many factors, and I know we're going to be analyzing this for a long time. Raymond Vickery, your response to that question, what do you think worked? And so basically Trump reaching out to the basics, as we were discussing earlier with Gauri, it's all about, you know, the inflation, the rising costs, immigrants, and a more inward, safer America, as he kept promising, rather than these big ideas that the Democrats had, and also this fear mongering in a sense, which is now, it's now being referred to, about how this will be the death of democracy.
Well, thanks very much for having me. I think it's perfectly obvious that immigration and inflation, particularly at the grocery store, were key issues across the board. I would also say that there was a strong reaction in red states to the so-called wokeism, which really means looking at people who are homosexuals, who are people who are transgender, looking at abortion even as promoting immoral kinds of activities. It turned out that there was a large reaction to that, particularly among conservatives, and they were energized and turned out on it. I would say that I think that the U.S.-India relationship is strong and will continue to grow, but underlying it all in U.S.-India relations is democratic systems. And if democracy goes away, it seems to me that there's very much weakness there. I think that building peace and stability, people were concerned about what has happened with Ukraine and the invasion of Russia, and in regard to Gaza. Everybody wants peace, and somehow the Trump folks were able to convince others that those wars were really the responsibility of the United States and the Biden administration. It'll be interesting to see whether or not there can be any peace and stability brought about with a guy that does not want to commit to actual
India-US relationship very well. Mr. Vickery, you understand the US-India relationship very well, and in the backdrop of what a Trump 2.2 administration will mean for India, help us understand what could be his priority. Everybody is bracing for maybe higher tariffs, a tougher immigration policy, and also, of course, a different view as far as both Russia and China are concerned, both of which impact India very significantly. In your assessment, How do you see the new New Delhi-Washington DC relationship under a Trump administration, especially in these 3-4 areas?
So is that addressed to anyone or?
Right, Mr. Vikri, if you could go ahead on that.
Yes, Mr. Vikri and Adele,
Yeah,
both can take that
I'd
question.
be happy to go too. I'd be happy to go ahead on that. I think that particularly in the trade and economic area, I was Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Trade Development. We're in for a difficult time of trying to square the circle on tariffs. Trump, in his campaign, put forth what he would call, I would think, Fortress America economy. That is, you're going to raise tariffs on everybody across the board, whether or not they're friends or foes. That, in my view, would be disastrous for the economy, both in the United States and in trade partners like India. I think in regard to immigration, he's been very strongly anti-immigration. That means it's going to be more difficult for Indians to get visas to the United States. It means that the H1B program is likely to be curtailed. Now, there are those who say that it's completely different when you talk about economics from geopolitics. But I believe that they're one and the same reality. They influence each other. And you can't have a strong relationship between the U.S. and India unless it's across the board, both economically and in regard to geopolitics. In regard to China, we made a lot of progress in the Biden administration with the Quad, bringing the democracies of Japan, Australia, United States, and India together to see that China plays by the rules. The Trump approach is pay your own way or we don't want to help you out. Now, there's a lot of good feeling that is exhibited with Prime Minister Modi and anyone who is in power in the United States. And that is a good thing, but it does not, as I say, feed the bulldog in regard to being able to have concrete examples of how we would help each other, particularly in regard to China if they try to reclaim Arunachal Pradesh, if they won't play by the rules in the South China Sea, if they invade Taiwan. What's going to happen in actual relationships between the United States? We've made a lot of progress in that area, but it can't be that everything goes alone.
All right, Dr. Swasti Rao, you also come in here on this issue. What a Trump presidency will mean for geopolitics. We'll see, I expect, a lot of resetting of relationships. There was a tenuous relationship with Europe over, NATO, etc. So you're reading, what do you feel? And also, what would it mean for the two wars currently that are taking place, Ukraine and West Asia?
Well, thank you for that question, Gargi, and hello to you, Gauri. I've been following your wonderful commentary since morning, and of course, now we all know where the results are. So very quickly on the geopolitics, see, I have argued that I do not see Trump administration taking any drastic measures. I mean, there will definitely be some change because, of course, the Republican worldview has a more isolationist stance. I don't see them getting completely isolationist. I've actually written that I would rather see a kind of a conservative internationalism with transactionalist overtones to be the real hallmark of what Trump's foreign policy will look like. In simpler words, what I mean to say is that I do not see that he would come to power and immediately stop the Russia-Ukraine war. In fact, not many people realize that he could actually double down on tightening the sanction regime on Russia in order to force Russia to get into a negotiation, kind of a mode. And that would also have implications for India because India has been one of the biggest buyers of discounted Russian crude oil. So that's on the one hand. The other hand is that with respect to Ukraine. He could also, activate the Lend-Lease agreement, which was signed by the Biden administration, but never really activated because President Biden kept using the Presidential Drawdown Authority, to actually send money to Ukraine. So he does remain unpredictable, and then he is also erratic, and he would like to be remembered as somebody who brought the Russia-Ukraine war to an end. I can totally see that because it's also his last term. He's not going to be running again. But however, to sort of project himself as a problem solver, and the first thing that he would do the minute he takes office, that kind of a knee-jerk solution I do not see happening. I don't think he really has a solution. But what I do find promising about Donald Trump coming to power is that at least in his under his leadership, there could be a kind of a decisive moment which would come earlier in the Russia-Ukraine war, and it's very clear that Ukraine will have to cede territory. It's all about at what point and what is that equilibrium where the two sides start negotiating and what the terms of those negotiations are. So that is with respect to Ukraine. With respect to Europe, of course, I think the mood in Europe is very dull because they do not want to keep having the Trump bill, which has been so painful for them because they've been forced to now pay more to bolstering their security, something that they never really wanted to do. At least the biggest economies didn't want to do. So Germany, of course, must be very unhappy. But despite that, if you look at the Trump proofing, maneuvers within Europe, they had already started in anticipation of a Donald Trump comeback. And the bad news is that it would probably not help Ukraine much in the short term because most of these effects or most of these strategies would start showing their impact only towards the end of 2030. And that's where the European defense industrial base is actually looking at. So in the longer term, of course, it means good news for Europe because they'll be forced to bolster their security. West Asia, of course, nothing. I think
we'll take some of this in the later part. What you're saying is important. Right. Let me also get in, Neelam, on this in terms of specifically the aspect that I feel was a very important part of this election around the Indian diaspora that really came to the forefront in these elections, whether it was Trump reaching out on Diwali, whether his campaign reaching out specifically to the Indian-American community, the fact that inroads were made in a demographic which was traditionally predominantly Democrat. That shift, I think, is a very significant part of this election as well. And Neelam, comment on the significance of the Indian-American community in a Trump 2.0 administration. Where do you see? There's expectation that Vivek Ramaswamy could probably even head DHS. But beyond that, how do you see the Indian-American community under a Trump 2.0?
So I think the political significance of the Indian-American community has been increasing. However, in addition to all the outreach that I suppose we can call him now President Trump, has made in the past, and his warm exchanges with Prime Minister Modi, who himself has been re-elected a few months ago. I think it also is important to keep in mind that the majority of the Indian community remains committed to democratic voting. However, like other ethnic groups, the younger members of the Indian-American community, including younger men, have tended to lean more Republican. That will show up. Its consequences in American politics will show up over time. But at this moment, I think we need to keep in mind that most of the members of Congress of Indian origin remain Democratic. There are 6 of them already in. I understand a 7th may well be coming in. So we shouldn't exaggerate how close the equation between incoming president is and the Indian community. What is significant is that the Indian community is more and more active and at a level which is really interesting. More younger Indian Americans work in the US Congress as aides, foreign affairs, legislative assistants, whatever. But they are getting into what is the sinews of power of the US establishment. Those aspects are really very interesting. Of course, the fact that there are these high-profile Indian origin CEOs including Ajay Banga heading the World Bank. These things all add to the sort of charisma of the Indian community. That, of course, applies across the board. It's not confined to Republicans. It applies as much to Democratic politicians.
Right, you're referring to the what's known, loosely as the Samosa Caucus, and it's got a new member. So that has been a bit of a, talking point here, of course. But Rick Mehta, your comments now, you've been waiting patiently. I'm sorry, we'll be coming across to all the other guests as well. But Rick Mehta, if you can, talk about, what the Trump years and this concern about the revenge politics, was a lot of it rhetoric on the campaign trail. In his first comments, Trump did seem somewhat more conciliatory. He spoke about healing. He spoke about let's make America healthy again.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me on, especially with this esteemed panel. So there's a couple, let's first look at the logistics, and this is important. We have a term-limited president now, who's President-elect Trump, who's going to be coming into his second term. What does that mean? He's finally done campaigning. President Trump can be himself. He can accomplish the things he wants to. And at the end of the day, remember, he's the man who wrote Art of the Deal, right? Making deals is exactly the reason why the people of America hired him for the top job. And we want him to come in and fix the economy. We want him to lower inflation, lower interest rates, but most importantly, cure this depression-like area of unemployment that our country is currently in, the doldrums of the Biden-Harris administration that completely botched the recovery post-COVID and drove our country into one of the worst economies that we've experienced. And so this is the reason why the man got the job. But now let's look at the social issues. When we're talking about bringing people together, President Trump, time and time again, has said that he is working for all of America. And this is important because the drive here is based on a mission, and that mission is very simple: America first. And so as we're talking about policies across the board, we're talking about geopolitics, there's going to be some concern. What will the relationship be with US-India, US-China, and others? And at the end of the day, President Trump is all about making a deal and doing what's fair for America, pulling us out of treaties that continue to bring America down rather than level the playing field. So we're going to see a spike in American-made products. We're going to see manufacturing supply chain being brought back home. And then we're going to have an entire disruption of the way we do things. With Robert F. Kennedy being very close and Elon Musk, these are very wealthy outsiders that are coming in also to work on policies, not for their own personal benefit. When you talk about protecting the First Amendment, very big Elon Musk has made it a point to talk about making sure that our constitutional rights are protected. Robert F. Kennedy has been out there championing to make sure that we look at the determinants of health. What are the reasons why we spend the most on patients but get the least back in return? And so it's all about going to be unpacking the value. What is the value in protecting constitutional rights? And so you're going to have folks like Vivek Ramaswamy be highly influential, highly involved at protecting medical innovation and protecting American rights altogether. And so I think we're going to see a very exciting Trump 2.0.
All right, I'd like to get Adele Nazarian's view on what was just said by Rick Mehta, and also, are you hopeful? Everyone's talking about how divided American society is with these elections. Are you hopeful now that, given the kind of tone Trump took in his speech, that perhaps there can be some amends made?
Great to be on with everyone. I agree with Mr. Mehta. I think Trump is definitely a changed man. He is a uniter this time around. And I believe that the unfortunate assassination attempts on his life were a wake-up call. He found God, if I can say that in a way. And he doesn't want to see the country that he loves so much go downhill. And I think that's why he is going to take a more proactive retro tone. He's not going to use the same, let's say divisive kind of rhetoric that he was using the last time around. And despite the fact that the left has come after him in a hellish way and just relentlessly called him names, derogatory terms, completely mischaracterizing him as Hitler, all these absurd characterizations. I have a feeling that he's going to put the country and its people ahead of his ego. And do what's best for the nation. And that means I think there are going to be some people who have to be taught lessons. If I was advising him, I would absolutely make sure that he is, going after the Jack Smiths of the world and whatnot. But at the end of the day, I think when it comes to a lot of others, those who weren't trying to actually have him in a ditch somewhere dying, basically, and wouldn't give him a hand to help him up. I think besides those people who absolutely try to inflict the most damage, he's going to overlook that and again, just put the American people first. And I do think one of his first orders of business, a few first orders of business in his first 100 days in office will absolutely be to end these wars. It's so unfortunate that we weren't able to get him in 2020 so that we wouldn't have to inherit these costly wars that are burdensome to the American end user, everyday Americans' pockets. The bottom line is the cost of gas has gone up. The cost of groceries have gone up. The cost of credit card debt, that's been increasing as well. Trump is inheriting, let's not kid ourselves, a massive debt, a very, very unhealthy economy that is the runoff of the previous administration. But I do know that he will do whatever it takes to set things straight. It may take a little bit of time, but this war will be ended. The war between Ukraine and Russia, unnecessary. The war in the Middle East between Israel and Hamas, that will also, I think, come to an end, and I can guarantee that there will not be any more wars started. As far as the economy and for trade goes, in terms of tariffs, people have complained here, analysts, on the fact that they believe Trump doesn't know. Even John Bolton, I was on a program with him previously, complaining that Trump doesn't understand the way tariffs work. I have to differ with that. I believe he does know how they work. He has amazing advisors surrounding him this time around, and I believe that he will do what is going to not only benefit America, but frankly, this time around, and I say this election was a referendum not only on the future of America, but on the future of the West. And whatever he does for America will directly impact what happens in Europe. It will directly impact what happens in India, in Bharat. And I do see a very, very beautiful continuation of the strong friendship and alliance between the US and India. And I do hope that it translates across the rest of the world, because I believe in it now more than ever.
Right, Adele, quite a rosy, view of what the next Trump years will entail. And we'd like to get the other panelists on this. And of course, former Foreign Secretary Shashank there on what Trump years would mean for India-US relations. We're going to slip into a very short break and be back with more. Do stay with us.
I believe we have Natasha with us from Pennsylvania to talk to us about the swing state that swung in favor of Trump and is the reason why he is headed to White House very soon. Natasha, what is the mood like on the ground? What are voters saying? The reason why the state flipped, the issue on which they actually voted for Trump?
Absolutely, Gauri. Just this morning, we were speaking to a young woman who actually drove us to our location here on the steps, which Kamala Harris was in her final rally in Pennsylvania, Rocky Steps. Well, this woman, white woman, was telling us why she went for Trump, and was very clear to her. She felt that Trump would be better for her pocketbook. This is something we talk a lot about, her wallet, but also more than that. There were issues that she's concerned about. She doesn't want to see transgenders being allowed to play equally with female sports. And she also said that she didn't trust Kamala Harris on what mattered most to her family. And she also pointed out that she felt like a minority in Philadelphia, which is Pennsylvania's largest city because it's primarily blue and Democratic. She felt like a minority, but she's not the minority when it comes to the larger state of Pennsylvania, which is comprised of rural areas. It's got industrial towns, and a lot of people, despite the different landscapes, all concerned about the daily wages having gone down, and the daily wages not really matching up to what they see when they enter that grocery store, and the inflation. Another major issue in Pennsylvania has been fracking. and whether fracking should be supported or not. Now, Kamala Harris, when she was running against Biden for the Democratic ticket, had said that she supported a ban on fracking, and she backtracked on that during this cycle, and that also created distrust amid some voters in those areas who want the jobs that come out of fracking. That was a major issue, and it is still surprising to see that despite all of these different factors and the different vote banks, including young men who also trust overall have come out more in favor of Trump, that this state went by a pretty huge margin to Donald Trump. It wasn't close as it was expected. It was supposed to be 0.5% or 1% difference, but that was not the case. And this is, since 1988, actually, this is only the second time that a Republican has, in the presidential races, has been able to take this state, a really decisive factor, and also really in many ways a bellwether for the issues that matter across the country as well.
All right, and Natasha, thanks so much for joining us with that. And let's go back to our panel also now. And we have a former Foreign Secretary, Shashank, waiting. I'm so sorry, sir, it's taken so long to get to you. But your comments on what Trump 2.0 would mean for India. We've just had that breaking news coming in. The Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, has spoken to Donald Trump, congratulated him. Both have vowed to work towards, peace in the world, and also Donald Trump telling Prime Minister Modi that he is, that how he's a remarkable man, how the President Trump tells the Prime Minister Modi considers him India a true friend, and says Modi is one of the first world leaders that he's spoken to after his victory.
I agree that Prime Minister Modi is a man of peace. He has repeatedly talked about it, and I think that will be a great service to humanity and to Indo-US relations if Prime Minister Modi and President Trump can carry out a regular dialogue and depend on each other's strength. I think that should be really good for bringing peace to Europe, and hopefully, because the Middle East peace is really always elusive, but perhaps these two people can get together. Prime Minister Modi can talk to people in among the Palestinians as well as to the Israelis and the Iranians, and I think that should be used by President Trump in his second presidency to consider among his advisors within America and then also outside. I think he can consider Prime Minister Modi as his good friend. I don't think there would be several issues. I'm quite sure that experts from both sides would be discussing them. We also have the various think tanks who have produced an agenda 2025 for the Republicans, and I'm quite sure that would be studied by the Indian scholars to make sure that to find what are the giveaways and the interests of both sides can be somehow matched. So I think this is what I would say at this stage.
Right. There are concerns about, trade, what this would mean and what negotiations would take place. Also visas, whether it would mean a reduction of H1B visas for Indians.
Well, that's a worry. But point is that Republicans would like to reduce the illegal migrants' numbers. So if that is the priority, then there are a very large number of Indians who are waiting in the pipeline for both visas as well as for regularization of their American passports. So I think something should be done about it. And President Trump, during his campaign, he has spoken about the respect which he has for the mental capabilities of the Indian, the leadership that the Indian community has given in various important corporations in America. So I think there is some certain kind of trust in India, trust in among the leadership, and I think they should be able to work it out. I know it's not a very easy issue. There would be strong feelings on the American side. There are many people in America who would not like too many people coming from outside. But the point is that if they want to keep production centers in America, then I think the investments, etc., there could be joint ventures in many ways which they can talk about.
I think we can get Vivek Mishra on the two aspects. One is the kind of bonhomie that Trump and Prime Minister Modi shared, and how much of that is going to translate into progress, particularly on thorny issues, because these are very strong personalities, and because they get along well, maybe some of those very thorny issues could expedite. So how much of that bonhomie matters? And secondly, in a Trump 2.0 administration where he wants to end these conflicts very soon, he said that he wants to end Ukraine, he wants to end Gaza. How important will be India's mediation efforts? They have happened in the past. Will they expedite? Will they put New Delhi on a higher pedestal as Trump wants to close some of these conflicts at the very earliest? Vivek Mishra?
On the question of bonhomie and chemistry, I think it's going to be very important and one of the drivers of the structural relationship that we have. On one hand, they're both, as you said, in their own accords, very strong personalities. But I think some of the legacy that lives on from the Howdy Modi event, the Trump visit to India, I think really are the meat around the bones that we're talking about in terms of a future Modi-Trump relationship. Remember that both of these leaders are very development oriented. And I think that's a psyche that'll be useful in driving this bilateral and giving it a new momentum, I think. And some of the concerns, I think I've heard some concerns that both India and the US will be looking out for their own interests. But I think to my mind, those interests, those concerns are really superficial in the sense that because of the institutional linkages between the two countries at various levels, at the level of defense, at the level of security, at the level of political relationship, I'm not so worried about what Make America Great Again and Make in India would mean. I think if you look at the defense, if you dive deep into the defense structure, that would be a good template to see how, despite the focus in both countries in their inward industries, I think there is a collaboration that has its own pace. On the second question of possible India's role, I think this if the last administration of Trump was any template or is any template, he would ask India to step up. And what that means for India is really up to its own accord. So, for example, in terms of Afghanistan, when Trump last administration asked India to put boots on the ground, India said no. But if it really asks India to step up on peace mediation, I think India would be all in. And it's a table to take for India in terms of building its own space at the global high table.
Right, Dr. Swasti Rao, earlier when you were, talking about the West Asia conflict, so there are two conflicts currently, the Ukraine conflict where we are expecting Trump, he has said that he would end it. What do you think his actions could possibly be in West Asia, given, the way it's been in the last year and the situation in Gaza as well as Lebanon?
Yeah, so very quickly, I think one needs to always, put these arguments within the context of what kind of a geopolitical environment is Donald Trump actually inheriting now. The world is radically different from 2016 to now in 2024. No matter how upbeat one tries to sound about Trump and his plans for Ukraine, I frankly do not think that he has a real plan. Like I said earlier, that he would like to be remembered as somebody who put the conflict to an end, but I don't think really he has a plan. And this is something that is coming from endless discussions with almost everybody into that region, whether it's the Poles or, the other Europeans and a lot of Americans as well. However, like I said, that yes, he would want to sort of build that momentum. And that's where, what Vivek said makes sense about India's position. In West Asia, things are radically different. Benjamin Netanyahu is actually coming, waiting for Trump to come. Trump is known to, you see the kind of congratulatory messages flying across, especially the Israeli, ecosystem. That's very obvious. Trump is known to be very stringent on Iran. He actually withdrew from the JCPOA, the nuclear deal, for instance. And I think he would make sure that Benjamin Netanyahu actually finishes. I don't know, how do you interpret actually finishes here, quote unquote, but he actually concludes this particular offensive in a meaningful way. The hostages are returned. So even though he's seen to be somebody who was the precursor or somewhere, he was the guy who basically made the normalization possible in 2020, and it was on that normalization where I2U2 and IMEC etc. had kind of come about. But the West Asian situation remains fragile, and everybody understands that as long as it is overridden with the, with the actions of the proxies, especially the Hamas, Hezbollah, and Houthis, there is actually no end in sight. So I think on the question of West Asia, Donald Trump is going to support Benjamin Netanyahu, but in a way that shows some tangible result. It's not just about mindless, killing of civilians because the terrorists are hiding behind them. So I would perhaps expect that. But just my last point is that please understand again that in 2016, we did not have a situation where we saw a certain axis of countries working in different theaters but helping each other. So, like we have in 2024. So in Europe, the prime actor out there is Russia, which is supported by China and North Korea. In West Asia, the prime actor out there is Iran, which is supported by Russia and China again. In Indo-Pacific, you have this crink axis, and then to have a coordinated response is going to be fundamentally different in quality from the era of 2016. Yes.
Right, we're completely out of time. We're going to have to end it there. Thank you so much all for joining us on the program. And it's been quite a day, Gauri. You still have a lot more, to go ahead. It's morning time there, and it's a dawn of a new Trump era, Trump 2.0.
Absolutely, Gargi. It's been a fantastic conversation today with you and our panelists. And the rest of the day, the highlight will be one, Kamala Harris is going to make that speech at Howard University. She would have liked to make a victory speech. But if she does come out and reach out to her support base, I believe that she's also going to lay the ground for possibly future political such endeavors. She ain't going out of town anytime soon. She's still young. She has age on her side. Let's see what else DC has lined up for NDTV and our viewers. And we are going to keep giving all those very details and latest updates right on NDTV 24/7.
All right, goodbye.